Welcome to Left on Red, where Gen X mom and gay millennial do socialism.
We've got left-wing views on news you can use.
I'm Scott,
I'm Susan.
and today we don't really have news.
There's always a lot of news, but the news is now unnewsworthy because it's like coming at this rate that is no longer sort of sustainable for your attention.
The news is also like the omni news. I feel as if a few weeks ago there was a lot of different things happening that were coming in different waves and needed explanation, and now it's just Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and it's the same story week after week, just different shades of they're racist.
Yeah, it's
they're
more
Nazis.
like it's no longer what's going on. It's just like how are they doing it?
Yeah.
And it's all the devil in the details kind of situation. And then it's like, oh, and then what legal challenges have been successful?
Yeah. What's a new way they're trying to seize unilateral control of the government? What's a new way they're trying to devastate people and deport people?
And so one of the things you might have noticed that here on Left on Red is that we're definitely angry at Trump, and we're definitely angry at Elon Musk, and we're definitely angry at people who like apologize for them and, you know, like give them financial support. But we're not really all that angry at people who voted for Trump, even though it hurt them. Like, I'm not a person who says, well, they get what they deserve. When I saw like a reel about red state teachers who said, oh, I voted for Trump, but I never thought he would defund our schools. Our schools are already doing very poorly. I'm not mad at them. I feel bad for them, just like I feel bad for everybody else. I'm mad at the Democratic Party leadership for doing nothing.
And not the Democratic voters, right?
No. I'm mad at the leaders for they're not gumming it up. They're not telling us to go gum it up. They're the leaders of the opposition party. So in like a standard parliamentary system, they're supposed they also call that, like in UK, a shadow government. They're not shadow anything. They're just like, you know, that tweet that's going to go down in infamy that our esteemed minority leader of the House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries, tweeted. He's like, presidents come and go, but Jesus or God is in charge. And I'm like, that's your answer? Like, are we now like praying for the next world? And I know that's Stylianos. He believes in the next world, but I'm like, that's not a sufficient response if you are a political leader who has institutional power, access to billions. What am I getting from the Democrats? I'm getting pathetic email donation requests. They're the last people I want to give money to right now.
You know, what's funny, to be fair, I don't think that tweet on its own was so like egregious, right? It was the context in which it's coming. It's not like there's anything wrong with Hakeem Jeffries being relatable to a majority of Americans that are religious and probably maybe are feeling a little nervous about the political situation, and he's trying to give them some level of comfort and say, look, we're all in this. We have maybe this common sense of shared belief.
Hey, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
All the things you're saying are great. I wish Hakeem Jeffries had tweeted those things.
Well, so I think that's what I'm trying to say. That tweet on its own is like, I bet a majority of Americans probably related to that in some capacity. I think
you're much kinder than me. I'm not that kind.
Well, the failure is that was like the only thing, that was the predominant message people are getting, which isn't some form of resistance. It's not some, I'm the minority leader, I'm going to use all the powers I can. It was just kind of this passing sentiment. And there was also news this weekend, or this Friday maybe, that he had met with leaders of Silicon Valley. And he was basically telling them, how do we mend our differences? We want to be your friends again. And now they're internally talking about how the Democratic plan is to move further to the right to capture the center as they expect the other tweet to be more extreme.
The other tweet that I'm thinking of is, I fear that the Democrats' take-home lesson from all this is we got to be more racist. And like, no, it's not move to the right so we capture the center. It's promote a left message and activate our base. So, like, it's like, actually, you have power, right? I'm not a person who studies political communication or marketing, but like, where do the ideas that people have about politics come from? They come from political leadership. Why is it that I had a friend talking to me about critical race theory in 2020? She is not a legal scholar who reads on critical race theory. It's something that comes from legal studies, right? She heard it from a Republican. She heard it from Fox News, right? We could just as easily have leadership on the media, you know, in social, like in the social media, creating new narratives about what's appropriate, right? Creating new ideas, linking one thing to another set of events that could reverberate through the population, but instead they're just like, Jesus, take the wheel. So no, I will judge it harshly in all contexts. I disagree with you completely. I will never be kind to Hakeem Jeffries or to Chuck Schumer. And we have both House and Senate leaders here in New York, and they're dismally, doing nothing. It's just like, it's incredible. Like Chuck Schumer gets a pass because he's quite old, and it's pathetic and it's disgusting. And that's why I'm mad at them, right?
Yeah,
Like
Susan's very upset.
I'm very upset. Like these people
I am
have
too.
institutional power. They have access to millions of dollars of resources, and the take-home lesson from 2024 is let's be more racist.
Yes,
Let's be more transphobic.
I would like 99% of the Democratic caucus to resign. I don't think, any of those people should remain in power. But this is like, okay, here's the topic that Susan and I were talking about before and what we want to talk about today. Why do we spend so much time criticizing Democrats and not so much time criticizing Republicans? And I've been thinking about this for a while and whether or not it's good. There's sometimes a debate on the left, especially internally in DSA, as to whether or not we need to train more energy talking about the right and Republicans. And people have sort of shifted that direction a little bit in the last year. But we still have our instinct criticizing the Democrats. And I have 3 reasons. Here's my thesis argument here. So
in this essay, Stylianos will.
Yeah, I need that ChatGPT. Write me an essay with these 3. Here's my 3 big ideas, and then let's go through them. The first is just kind of naturally, most leftists live under a democratic representative or government or whatever. Most leftists are concentrated in cities or urban areas, and probably we have a Democratic mayor or a Democratic governor or a Democratic senator or a Congress member, so on and so forth. So naturally, we are criticizing our leaders, right? Our representatives. And for the last 4 years, this was also true of the president, right? And so we're criticizing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the people in power. The second idea that I have, which is why leftists criticize Democrats, is that Democrats kind of represent, to most Americans, the left. And we need to criticize them in order to differentiate ourselves from liberalism, right? We need to explain to people, make it really clear that when we're talking about leftism and politics, we're talking about something totally different than this kind of inept, pro-business, corporate, capitalist, friendly liberalism that they've been seeing for the last 30 years, that has been abandoning the working class, that has been way too friendly to business and way too hostile to labor, to workers, to poor people. And we need to make that distinction really clear. And then finally, there is, of course, this desire, I think, among many people to realign the Democratic Party. And I think these are kind of 2 separate but similar energies. The first, that criticizing to distinguish ourselves, is of people who want to be more independent and establish this independence from the Democratic Party. And then the realignment, which is from people who want to move the Democrats away from that liberal, pro-business, capitalist mindset towards a more working class idea. And then, of course, I said 3. Those were, I think, the 2 and the 2. The third big one is just that leftists are not in power, and we have very little power. And it doesn't always make sense for us to talk about the ways in which we can change the world because we don't have the ability to do so. But we need to grow our movement, and criticizing and putting forth propaganda and messaging and doing this communications is, we think, at the moment at least, a more effective tool to growing more socialists and leftists and building our movement than pretending we have the ability to make change at the national level and acting that way.
So I agree with those things. To me, the Democratic Party isn't a single entity, right? Because there's leaders who are elected, there's donors, and then there's the people who vote. And the way that I've understood it, based on very cursory reading, a reading of the literature in political science, is that the Democratic Party is a coalition, right? And so is the Republican Party, because we don't have all the European-style parliamentary PR systems where I would be probably voting in a different party than some people in the SA would, right? And I think that one time AOC famously said that me and Joe Biden wouldn't be in the same party if we were European, right? And people got really angry, and it's like, no, that's just like institutions 101. Okay, so it's a coalition, right? And traditionally the coalition has included like a vast and diverse range of constituencies and communities. Like the New Deal, right, created a constituency for the Democrats, right? So working people, unions, industrial workers, and then as well as civil rights movement and the women's movement and the LGBT movement, but also Wall Street was an important constituency. And like, suburban white professionals were an important constituency. And so the thing is that the Democratic Party has since like the 1970s been like, we need to appeal towards the billionaire class, the financial class, and the white suburban, mostly white suburban voters as a way to win, right? And so what they did was they abandoned the New Deal coalition, which included Southern white workers. And, they were kind of like, and let's just take the civil rights and the women's rights and the LGBT folks for granted. Where are they going to go, right? They basically ceded the working people of the New Deal coalition to like just be on their own. And so the Republicans fought the culture war to get them to join, right? And so what we're trying to say is that we don't have to abandon our civil rights, our new social movement commitments to also say like, that New Deal coalition is good. We need a green New Deal. We need so many things, but like abandoning the base, which is like the vast majority of the voters that the Democratic Party has traditionally had, hasn't worked out well for anybody. Hasn't worked out well for the Democrats. Hasn't worked out well for the working people. But also is like really bad for democracy, right? So for me, being mad at the Democratic Party is because that is the only access to institutional parties and power that I have. Like nobody cares what socialists think if you're a Republican, but Democrats will just claim they don't care about us, but they'll talk about us until they're blue in the face, right?
Yeah.
And so actually they recognize that the socialist left is traditionally part of that coalition. They may not like it, but we're very important to things like the New Deal coalition, to the civil rights, to women's rights, the LGBTQ, like social movements. All these things are fundamentally important, right? Like socialists are part of those coalitions, and they were driving forces behind those social movements. And like, try as they might to say we need to be more centrist, they're trying to say the vast, like a huge block of our voting, right, coalition doesn't matter to us, because they're really hoping that saying we're not Donald Trump is sufficient to keep that coalition hanging on. But instead what we have is, I was having a conversation. I went to brunch with my mom friends, because I'm a lib. I can be a lib mom too.
You love feeling brunch guilt.
I do.
You're allowed
But
to
I
go to
also like,
brunch.
it's
Yeah,
very
people go to
interesting,
brunch.
for me to be around like people who aren't like just thinking about politics all the time, because they do think about politics, but not in the same way.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like around the table, half the people there, like these are just typical urban moms. They all send their kids to public schools. They're like, half of our parents voted for Trump, not mine. And that included people whose parents are immigrants, right? And so like, we don't really know what caused this to happen. Some of them were like classic Republicans. They've only voted for Republicans their whole lives. Other ones were just like, the Democrats have abandoned working people. And they're not wrong, right? And like when Eric Adams says that, his motivations might be, suspect, but he's not wrong either. In terms of like policies, we know, right? I talk about all the time, the winner take all book that everybody in DSA loves to read by Pearson and Hacker, that the institutions that the U.S. have since the 1970s have been used in a way to further the power, further the wealth of the already powerful and wealthy in the U.S. It hasn't been used to. Our institutions don't work to address people's needs and wants through our institutions, through effective policy. That's not how it works. Our institutions work to promote the political preferences of the already rich and powerful.
And part of the way that happens is this two-party system. So you were saying at the beginning of what you just said right now that if AOC and Joe Biden were in Europe, they would be in two different political parties. And there was this picture, maybe it was from a news article or something, and people were dunking on it. I think I talked about it on the show before, but I actually really agree with it. And it was mapping out, if we were a parliamentary system with proportional representation, what would our parties look like? And it, I think, had 5 political parties, which was the nationalist right, the center liberal right, the center liberal left, the Progressive Party, and the Green Party. And it showed how the nationalist right and the liberal right are basically the two coalition elements of the Republican Party, and how the liberal, like center left, the progressive, and the Greens would be the coalitional elements of the Democratic Party. And that makes a lot of sense to me, at least in terms of where Americans seem to be at right now. And to your latter point about the Democrats are abandoning the working class, it's interesting that giving up the working class doesn't mean that the working class went and founded our own new party, right? We didn't have anywhere else to go. Because we have a two-party system, you either go to the Democrats or the Republicans, or you just opt out. And we saw what most people did was opt out, right? In the last election, we saw that Kamala Harris didn't exactly lose tens of millions of voters to the Republicans, to Donald Trump. She actually just lost those voters. They simply didn't show up. But there were some increases, small but still there, for Republicans, for Donald Trump. And a lot of those came from non-white Americans, from lower income Americans, from Americans without college degrees. So in some aspect, a lot of those people did find purchase, not in the liberal right, right? Not in that like liberal right-wing party, but in that nationalist right-wing party. And there was this really great Reddit comment from the Victoria 3 subreddit. And if you want to learn about like capitalism and Marxism and economics and want to play a fun game while you're doing it, Victoria 3, highly recommend. And the person was asking, why does the petit bourgeois, which is a name we use to refer to like small business owners, small landlords, whatever, why in this game does a petit bourgeois always support fascist parties? And there was a really great like random person in this gaming subreddit who explained how predominantly that group of people finds that policies that advance the liberals, right, the wealthy, the capitalists, the people that believe in that like liberal version of the world, usually only support really big businesses and corporations and billionaires. And then policies that support the poor and the working class and middle class, if you say, I don't know about middle class, usually don't support the small business people either. And so they kind of have this like sharp right-wing turn to fascism, because in that scenario, only the nationalist stuff that explicitly harms non-white people, or wherever they happen to are, the minority people, the non-majority, and the not poor, the poor people who are getting hurt by those policies, have some benefit for the petit bourgeois. And that just made me think about the ways in which Democrats are abandoning the working class, or trying to capture this, they think, growing suburban vote, and they're failing to do that. And like you said, they're like, okay, how can we get more racist? And they continuously seem to forget this lesson. One, that you need to appeal to working class voters. You need to have a vision that's positive for people. And two, if I'm a racist, I'm not going to vote for the racist light party. I'm just going to vote for the racist party. I'm just going to go vote for the Republicans. I don't have an interest in like 50% racism.
Right, exactly. So the Democrats, I made this point before on the show, which is that the Democrats tried to adopt a law and order, like a hard law and order stance, when they saw the Republicans stirring up a backlash to Black Lives Matter. But you can't do Republican light when it comes to law and order, because Republicans will always do it better than you, right? Yeah. So, but what they could have done and say, hey, you know what? These Black Lives Matter protesters, this biggest single social movement in the history of America, they've got a couple things that we agree with, right? And they didn't have to say, like, we're going to dismantle the entire police state, because that's not something the Democrats would ever do. But they could say, hey, diversion programs and, legalization and decriminalization, we could maybe fund some more pilot programs to see how this affects, crime and safety. They could have said, yeah, moving away things like wellness checks and dealing with homeless people, having that shift towards social workers and mental health care professionals instead of police might be the better option. But instead they were like, no, more money for police, right? We don't want to defund the police. We want to fund them more. And I'm not here to say that, like, right, we would have been happy with them having this like sort of like lib response to Black Lives Matter, but they didn't even want to do that. They wanted to show that they were just as hardcore and just as anti-crime as the Republicans.
When they did that OMB memo canceling federal funds, Chuck Schumer was like, the Republicans are defunding the police. What? Bro, shut up. There's Chris Murphy, I think. Maybe I'm getting his name wrong.
The
Some
guy
senator.
from Connecticut?
Yes.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
him? He was like bragging about how Joe Biden deported more immigrants faster than Donald Trump. What are you doing?
Yeah.
What?
That's not the move, you all, right? Like trying to claim like, oh yeah, well, we're better at being terrorists to our immigrant community. We promote police violence better than Trump does, right? No, like don't, like that's what the problem is, right? Is that like the only party that of which socialists and progressives can join the coalition, not only do they feel threatened by us, but they define themselves in saying that's not us.
Yeah.
Instead of saying that, oh, maybe they have an idea or two that we can listen to, right? Which is like, I think it's very much to their detriment. And if their goal is to get elected, right?
The American people and voters consistently say they like taxes on the rich. They like policies that don't favor the elite. They support things like Medicare for all. They do I think the burning of the Minneapolis police station like polls better than 50% when people were asked about it. The American people are consistently saying these are the things that we support. Even when you talk about illegal immigration. I think I talk about this so much because this poll boggles my mind, and it's exactly what you're saying about how we can change people's minds. There's a poll that's out there, and I have to find it.
We'll link it in the comments.
Yeah. And it's asking people, do you support mass deportations? And it's like 57% of Americans are like, yeah, we should support mass deportations of illegal immigrants. And then one of the next questions is, would you support deporting someone who's been here for 7 years and speaks English and has a family and a job? And it's like 75% are like, no, absolutely
that
not.
same
You should stay in this country.
Survey also says, should there be pathways for regular status and citizenship for someone who's been living in the U.S. for 5 years, didn't even have an English thing, has been working, and has not committed any crimes? And something like 71% of Americans are like, well, of course. Yeah. So the same people are saying that they support deportations and they support like pathways to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, because it's all about how you frame it. If you frame it as, here are people in our community, their children go to public schools, they pay taxes, because of course they do, right? They contribute and they work and they're hardworking Americans just like you. Do they have a right to have, regular status? And people will be like, yeah, of course, they shouldn't be terrorized by ICE.
Yeah.
But then if you make it as, when you start talking about like migrants, teeming, borders, like unsafe, crime, right? Then people are like, oh, Lord, get them out of here, right? So, I'm not a psychologist or whatever, but like the way things are presented matter, which is why, people, when they talk about survey data, the way you prime every question will ultimately affect the way a person responds. And so like if the Democrats were out there saying, what makes America great is our history of, wave after wave of people coming from other countries, bringing their like ingenuity and their work ethic and their cultural like contributions. Like one of my friends and I were making a joke. I was like, if you're a right winger who hates immigrants, you should not be able to eat any food, right? Except for American food. But I couldn't figure out what that was, because even a hamburger is like from Germany.
German, yeah.
Yeah. And so it was like a hot dog. I was like, what is an American allowed to eat? I don't know, but you definitely can't like, it was like, I think there was a guy.
They stole from the Native Americans.
Right. Like you can't even eat like Johnny corn cakes, right? I was like, I don't even know what you can eat. Boston cream pie, I think, is basically it. But like this guy was like pro like mass deportation. He was eating a burrito. And I was like, you can't eat a burrito. Who do you think made that burrito? Like
and this does get into like a little respectability politics, which you don't love. Like we shouldn't have to prove that someone's like a good, hardworking person.
Sure, but like we know that the vast majority of people who come to this country are coming here for economic reasons, and they do it. And if they aren't able to make it economically, they go home, right? The only reason why you leave your home is because there's something better, right? And like the people who study like undocumented migration, like there was like a whole field of study in economic geography, they look at how like, okay, there was a huge wave of people who left the U.S. with the construction dying down in 2008 following the financial crisis, right? You don't have to kick them out. They leave, right? Because why would they live in a high cost of living place if they can't send home sufficient amounts of money, right? So like your average, this is like data from like 2010, but the average migrant in the US sent like thousands of dollars home, right? In remittances. So if they can't do that, they don't need to suffer, be away from their family, be away from their communities, right? They go back.
Yeah.
And so like we know that the push-pull of people coming to the US is quite simply economic opportunity. They're not here to hang out, right? They can hang out at home.
Yeah.
Right?
Or
We have
sometimes,
hanging out at home, okay?
yeah, or often, and the hanging out is usually better at home in your like
Right.
where you grew up with your
And if they're not
family and your friends.
actively economically like making money, it's because they're providing free care work, right?
But
Like
there's also
they're
instances where, like political asylum, for whatever reason, that people might have to leave their home countries, violence, often destabilization caused by the United States.
sure. And that look at what happened in Syria, right? The civil war's over. Europe had to absorb tons and tons of Syrian refugees, and what's happening? They're all going back because they want to go home.
They want to be home.
Right.
All of this is not to say, oh, we love them only when they're like economically viable or whatever. As leftists, we fundamentally believe every human being has equal like human rights. It's not negotiable, period. I think what we're trying to get at here, to get back to our criticism of Democrats and liberals, is we can't cede to Republicans every single time they frame something a certain way. We can't just say, oh, all the voters are suddenly racist Nazis, and now we just have to be like Nazi light. Like, no, people are up for grabs. People don't have like firm ideologies. Not every voter has not like read
Most
every
people
single political
don't
book.
spend a lot of time thinking about politics.
Yeah.
Even if, like, okay, so like the whole egg thing or the price of eggs, as we all do like a Hunger Game over eggs. Evidently, there were no eggs at Costco recently.
It happened to me a few days ago.
Yeah,
Before
it happened to
Aaron tweeted
him,
about
and
it.
yet he
Yeah.
still doesn't support Trump. There are so many ways that Democrats could have taken what regular people care about, which is the cost of living crisis that they feel, and not just say, oh no, inflation is better, it's improved. Like, that doesn't help people's feelings when they're like, trying to check out at the grocery store and they're like, my groceries used to cost like $25 a week and now it's like $50, right? Like lecturing them about economic theory or saying, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that we've got the tightest labor market in like 3 decades. Like, nobody cares about stats, right? Like, people care about how they're feeling and what they're perceiving in the world. The Democrats could have tried to speak to this, but they didn't. And maybe I'm being too harsh, right? Like, it's not very common that a party gets to stay in power after a period of inflation, right? So you could look at, the Labour Party, Labour in UK, and say the only reason why they won is because the Conservatives were in power for so long, and there was a pandemic and a quasi-live, as they like to call it, cost of living crisis. Quasi-live, right? And also like leaving Brexit also made everything more expensive, right? So part of it could just be like maybe some things aren't up for grabs for the Democrats, but they could have maybe tried, right? Like, we don't know until you try. And what we do know is that Democrats didn't try. They just kept saying, please don't vote. Vote for us because we're not Trump. And ultimately, when people's lives don't feel great, they're like, maybe a little change is what we need.
Yeah.
Hope and change.
And we have to offer that hope and change. I think to end this, we're talking about criticizing Democrats. We talk about Republicans right now. We just have to be really extremely confident that the average person, the average working class person, the average voter, whoever you want, whatever slice of American or global society you want to take, does not have their mind made up. They are not walking around with all of these preformed ideas and opinions. They don't have this like firm ideology. They have some vibes. They have some basic values. They have some ideas about the world, but they are available. They're open for you to speak to and try to persuade. And when we talk about issues like immigration or abortion or the right to vote or gender or gay marriage or war, I could go on, any issue, everyone is persuadable. Everyone is open.
Except for Elon Musk. So there's some people we can't persuade, right?
What about like normal people?
Right. Normal people. Like, so not Jeff Bezos. We're fine with that. Not like Zuck, right? So regular people who voted for Trump, like I saw a tweet too. Everything is not Twitter, but I saw a tweet and someone said, look, if you know somebody who's like, I didn't know it would be like this under Trump, I never would have voted for him if I'd known this. The correct response is join us and not, you idiot, right? Because we have to have compassion for everybody, right? Because they're human beings and recognize that they are all potentially like allies that we can join us,
Yes.
right? Except the class, obviously, people of certain class positions we can never have,
Well,
and that's fine. There's not that many of them.
and the billionaires figured this out a while ago. The billionaires could have given up 10 years ago when it seemed like Republicans were never going to win an election again, whatever. But the billionaires were like, you know what? We have billions of dollars. We can spend it infinitely on media and social media and news. And over time, they changed American opinion.
And look what they did. They really have changed people's thoughts. Like they've created this idea of a woke mind virus. You know, like they've done so many things to things that seem like third rails in American politics now. But like, you know what? They're dismantling it right now, but people are pushing back. Like regular people who voted for Trump even are just like horrified. And this is an important moment for us to be non-judgmental. In your head, if you want to be mean, that's okay. And like in your group chats, it's okay to be mean, but like publicly, no, right? Like publicly, we have to recognize that like being a person in the world under capitalism is really hard. And if people thought, okay, this guy who's quite frankly very funny on the media could offer me something better, then like we have to understand that that's where they were. You know, and we have all kinds of comrades in DSA who've had all kinds of political walks of life. Like I, for example, come from a fundamentalist Christian background, Democrats, but nonetheless, you know, like people in my own family have had very hateful positions. I mean, it's not something that I like ran with, but like that's my background, you know, and they felt that way because of their faith.
I used to be a registered Republican.
That's how old were you? 18?
Oh God, yeah. Well, I was probably like 16 through like 20.
You can't be a registered Republican at 16.
Yeah, well, I'm saying like I identified like probably 16 to 22. I was really like, oh yeah, I'm a
yeah, because Republicans were like manly, I guess.
There's complicated reasons, but people come from all backgrounds. I'm channeling all my Christian compassion and forgiveness and grace to all the Trump voters.
And my non-Christian compassion.
Yeah.
My culturally Christian compassion.
But I hope this was interesting to think about why we're criticizing Democrats and liberals.
I'm always here to criticize Democrats, liberals, especially leadership, and forever grateful for people like Bernie Sanders who do use their positions of power. He's only been a senator for like not that long. I think Jeopardy, he's like only a 4-term senator, right?
Well,
like,
he's been in government in general.
Right, sure. But like the point is that
4 terms in the Senate is 24 years.
Yeah, but he's only recently got reelected. So
okay, but like he's been a senator
18
longer
years.
than half my lifetime.
Right, sure. Which you're not that old, so not impressed. But the point is that the whole time he's been in the Senate, he's been a consistent voice for criticizing the Democrats and for criticizing the class warfare that both parties are engaged in. We need more of that. We need more of this principled position. He's not always right. We know that he's limited by the conditions under which he came of age politically. We certainly don't agree with a lot of his positions,
he's like
especially
a liberal Zionist.
Right. But like, you know, being a socialist in his day and age was very much tied to a certain kind of Zionism.
Yeah. And even as a liberal Zionism, he probably criticized Israel and the aid he's like been a bigger supporter of an arms embargo to Israel than virtually everyone else in Senate and Congress. But I think he also speaks to this lesson that we need to learn as leftists, which is we are not in power right now. Our path to power is a little bit of a long ways ahead. We have a lot of organizing to do before we get there. So until we are in power, it doesn't really make sense for us to debate and figure out how can we change the world. But we do have kind of a role and responsibility here to influence the people who are in power. And the Democrats are not in power right now. They don't have the House or the Senate or the presidency, but they are a lot closer to it. They have some power. We can't just let them off the hook. We have to continue to influence them. We have to continue to criticize them to show to working people that we can create an alternative. And we have to work there so that someday, very soon, hopefully we are the ones being criticized because we're the ones in power.
Can't wait.
Yeah, I have to.
Those awful socialists, right? But yeah. And, you know, if you want to help us build that power, if you want to help, you know, the DSA NYC DSA had a protest at Chuck Schumer's house recently for his feckless and cowardly lack of leadership. And go ahead, quote me on that. because that's what he's doing. I think he had a press conference where we brought an avocado to talk about the Mexico tariffs.
Oh God.
And a Corona. And he was very monotone. And I was like, that's what we need right now. We need monotone leadership.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, we need bold leadership, and it's not coming from the Democrats. It's coming from the socialists.
You should join DSA. You should also, if you're in New York, check out the Zohran Mamdani for mayor campaign. I'm most excited about that because it's speaking directly to everything that we said. He's criticizing the Democrats who have been in control of the city for a really long time. And he's speaking to a lot of regular New Yorkers and demonstrating what would an alternative look like and how do we get there. And a lot of people are paying attention. We have lots of great socialists in office electeds that we've endorsed and gotten elected, but no one pays attention to a race like they do to mayor, to governor, to president. So it's a really big race that people are paying attention to. It has national ramifications. This is something that gets reported on at the national level. And it's probably one of the best ways we as socialists can kind of raise our political brand and awareness and organize more people so that hopefully very soon we have a lot more power in moving the direction of this country.
All right. Well, listeners can probably hear the 7-child play date outside my door. And it was a snow day today in New York. Despite climate change, there is occasionally winter weather here still.
Yay.
Going to continue to blame the Democrats for insufficiently addressing that here in New York.
And it was beautiful snow. It was gorgeous if you
still,
were out last
it's still
night.
nice out, too. It's
No, I know,
nice
but,
and
last night,
yeah.
listening to the crystals hitting the snow carpeted floor, it was magical. The snow was glistening.
New York City is quiet when it snows because no one's yelling, nobody's driving, and the blanket of snow just kind of works as an acoustic absorber. I know nothing about sound, but it's really great. But anyway, yes, so let's keep having snowy winters. Let's keep fighting the right, fighting the Democrats, and, join your local DSA chapter.
There we go. I'm Scott.
I'm Susan.
And
solidarity
solidarity forever.